Hi there, and welcome to the Natanya Experience, where we explore the journey of transformation and go from the ordinary to the extraordinary. This episode is quite different today, and we're under the theme of organized minds. And my guest is none other than Michael Dowd. Now, there's so much about Michael Dowd out on the internet, the interwebs, if you will, that I don't want to go too much into his story. And it's one that you might think you know, but you don't really know. And I'm really excited to share that today we had a conversation that Michael himself on camera said explored some topics that have yet to be discussed. And this man has been already part of thousands of interviews for his role as a former New York City police officer in the 80s, where he, let's just say, fell into a different way of being than a traditional police officer. And it was a time when the entire world was going through a lot of change. We had the crack epidemic really strong in New York and East New York, where he was a police officer. There were on average 100 to 200 murders a year. The place was basically like a war zone, and there was incredible class divide, race divide, issues with everything from access to resources and basic safety for most of the citizens in that area. So Michael came into a war zone. He was a young man, fresh out of high school, new on the beat, had a family history of folks in the service. His father was a firefighter. He had family in the police force. So he had known that's a life of service and decided to be a part of it as an alternate to, of all things, being an accountant, and really found himself with a lot of tough choices, opportunities, feelings, and emotions that were very, very difficult for anyone to just make a snap judgment about. So, the thing that we did today was we really talked about what it was like for him. And without excusing any illegal or otherwise, let's say, bad behavior that might be categorized as such, without being so quick to judge, really thinking about what was it that led to those moments, those flashpoints that shifted his life from one trajectory to another? And what impact that had on him as an individual, his feelings about himself, but also as a husband, as a son, as a nephew, as a father. And we'll talk about all of those complicated layers and what that's like, because those are the kinds of things that don't necessarily make the headlines, but they make us who we are. And how he was able to take all of that pain and struggle and stress through his incarceration outside of the other side now, and finding ways to rebuild his life, reconnect with the world, help other people find themselves and reconnect, whether you're on one side of law enforcement or the other, and really create a new narrative for himself and how he wants to be out in the world. And I'm just so thankful for this time and this candor and my new friend, Michael Dowd. Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Natanya Experience. And today's theme is a new set called Organized Minds. And we're going to look at the hidden psychological battles faced between those in positions of power, whether you're in law enforcement or organized crime or the intersections in between. We're going to shed light on some of the emotional toil of living a double life. Today, I have a very special guest that I'm very thankful that he made time to be here, Michael Dowd, and wanted to start off the show with just a little bit about who you are and what you're working on right now that you're excited about.
So yes, my name is Michael Dowd. You got that right, and I'm considered one of New York's dirtiest cops ever, if not the. But I would beg to differ with some on that scenario. But that's what I'm considered, and I was uh, I was arrested by the federal government in 1992, and I spent 14 years sentenced in federal prison. But what I'm working on now, which is an important thing, is I'm involved in several things. One, I just dropped a podcast last week called "Good Cop, Bad Cop," the first episode that we produced, and we've had a good review so far, which I'm happy with. Secondly, I'm involved. Sorry. Secondly, I'm involved with producing something right now called Mobsters versus Monsters, which I'm excited about. Also, I have something going on with Ben Stiller and his crew from MGM. We're looking at doing a remake of the 7-5 documentary into a movie. So I got my hand in a lot of fires, and we're just trying to make one of them come to the finish line. But being in the industry of show business, you may understand that it's quite the process. So that's where I'm at today. I also do a lot of work with survivors of suicide attempts, and I'm a great outreach for many law enforcement officers that are going through turmoil right now. I get quite a few calls, believe it or not, about guys that are looking to end their lives, and I'm happy to be a support for them. So that's where I'm at right now.
Well, I thank you for that. Your story, without, even getting into it yet, and not to sound like a Hallmark card and just say it's amazing, but it's amazing. And I think anyone listening, no matter who you are, is going to learn something today, even about themselves, the law, the socioeconomic situations of the 80s and the crack epidemic. There's so much here. So, if it's okay with you, I'd like to take a little bit of a walk back in time, and we can start recently and then go back. Obviously, your time as a police officer in the 80s was a time where there was a lot of corruption, right? Addiction, and for you, also incarceration. So, one of the things I noticed in an interview you said was that you felt relieved when you were arrested. So, I kind of want to talk from there, and then we're going to go back into how it all started. But I was really curious about that statement. How did you find yourself at that time in terms of rescuing yourself from yourself?
So very great. I really enjoy, I'm really happy you picked that point, because that really becomes the turning point in my life. And you, out of all of the interviews and all the things I've said in my life, that was probably the turning point of my life, right? Because when I was finally arrested, I had been running from both sides of the law, really, in my mind, for probably the better part of 7 years by this time, which was my 10th year in the police department. And I had been through drug and alcohol counseling, technically alcohol counseling only, and I couldn't find my way out from under all of my bad decisions in the past, and the decisions I made on a daily basis back then were always abridged by my previous bad decisions. Because the thing was, this is no excuse, but every time I tried to do the right thing, people looked at me as if I was off center, because they know that that's not who I am. Technically, I'm the bad guy, I'm the corrupt guy, I'm the rogue guy, I'm the guy that does things a different way. So when I felt myself trying to do the right thing, even that was stressful. So imagine that. I had been a good cop, a rogue cop, a good cop, and I felt more comfortable as the rogue cop now. So my whole life was, even for wanting to, now this is not to deflect, but even for wanting to be a good cop, I felt wrong. And so I was living I use the word the dichotomy. I was living two opposites, and sometimes four opposites, right? Because you got to be a husband, a father, a son to your parents, a brother to your brothers, your brother to your sister. The life that I was living at that point, when they arrested me, they saved my life.
Yeah, that really stuck out to me because I think I told you before recording, I consumed a lot of media about you, and it was overwhelming. I actually called Ryan. I was like, I can't breathe this morning a bit. And I wanted to have a different kind of conversation. I
Right,
looked at all of them and I wanted to look at you, the person. I wanted people to understand what were the steps that led to that initial flashpoint, and then also the place where you shifted. And that's because that's the part that matters. It's not what you did or didn't do and what you're doing now. And how I know, and I'm very happy that you've come to terms with either past actions and situations and how you're paying it forward to help other people want to be here as first. And I say be here, meaning suicide prevention,
right,
want to actually do something good in the world, whether that's performing in their job or being a good husband or father. Like you said, you come from a big family, you were married, you have children. There's a lot, and we're going to get into those layers, but it's a really big deal to say that that was the best thing, getting arrested. So it struck me, and I realized the amount of pain that it must have been within you to go that long with that kind of conflict where you're kind of failing everyone around you. And like you said, when you try to, let's say, make either a good decision or action or um, something positive, it's almost like you get snapped back because people recoil because they're like, that's not you, or what are you doing? And then no matter who you are, I don't care, you're going to start to question, well, who am I? Am I a bad human? Or can I be a good human? And that's a really tough place. So I'm so glad that you found a redemption place from that. And then obviously, unfortunately, it was incarceration, which can only imagine was quite difficult, but that you've come out the other side and are here today, and we're making jokes and laughing, and you've got projects, and you're able to sort of show not just the glamorous side of the life in terms of the things you could buy and the places you could go, which I feel like a lot of people focus on, and or the crimes and who got away with what and what famous people were involved. And all of that is really important to the story. But today we're really talking about you, the person, and your journey. And so I thank you for being so open about this, especially it's not all hearts and flowers, and it's not all cool stuff, right? We talked about crying and being vulnerable and being emotional, and what it was like growing up in a big family. So if we can now go back a little bit further from before the arrest, and actually maybe back to those early days in the police force, in terms of like why you joined and what that was like and what you hoped to get out of it and what it was like in that precinct in the 75.
Okay, so like I'm always honest because I don't want to. I can't remember lies. So let's just be honest. The honest answer is I took the police test because I had no mentor in my profession, which was to be an accountant, and I didn't. And I wanted to have a life with a job to be able to support a wife and a child, and so I made a decision, even though it was against the decision of my current fiance at the time, who would eventually be my wife on a Thursday, shotgun wedding. But the point is that I shotgun wedding. You understand, a little backwards, but that's the way it was. And so I said, look, I need a job that could support a family. I knew being a police officer was going to be difficult, but you would figure, like my father was a fireman, so he figured out a way, and he raised 7 kids. So I thought that if I took the police job, I had mentorship in that. I had 3, 4 uncles that were police officers. My father was a firefighter, so I knew the civil service life. If I had gone into accounting and finished, which I was a pretty good accounting student, I may have gotten my CPA. I would think that I would have if I really knuckled down and would have gotten it. And then I would have been an accountant. But I had no mentorship, and there was a lot of fear. So right, a lot of our decisions in our life are fear based. There was no, I wasn't beaming with confidence to go further in that career. So the confidence came with taking a civil service job. So that's where I went, and I went to the police department, and I was scared to death, but I was less fearful than trying to take on a job where I had no mentorship. Um, in the police academy, I would say I was a little bit better than average student. I was still growing into myself. I was still a relatively physically immature young man. I was just starting to gain muscularity, late to puberty, and so by the time I hit my stride, I probably wasn't until I was 23 or 24. So even then, as a police officer, I was still a little bit less than, and so a lot of people go into the abuse of power, the kid who had his lunch money taken from him, that whole scenario. No, no one took my lunch money. I didn't take the police job to get even with people because nobody picked on me. I had 5 brothers and sisters. I was a good athlete. So no one really picked on me. I just had that the slow growth spurt. So I always felt a little bit coy. So because I didn't want to get myself in trouble I couldn't get out of. So that was my early part, even into my police career. By the time I became a real physical man where I could handle my even self and even be a little bit assertive, I was in my 23, 24 years of age. And at that point, I had been a police officer at least 2.5 years. And if you're in East New York for 6 months, you've done 10 years. Okay. So the experience that you would have gained in that 6 months in East New York, you're now a seasoned veteran in most places in the world. And yeah, so by the time I was 23, 24, I hit my stride both physically, police knowledge. Um, I was the guy. Everything hit just right. I had confidence. I could handle any situation. You're not invincible, but you feel it. Um, don't forget, being a police officer, maybe not today, but back then it gave you a slight edge because people didn't know what could happen to them, and they certainly didn't want to get arrested. So that always gave you a little bit of an edge in any confrontation. And then, of course, you had the radio, which gave you 500 friends, right? So that made you even bolder. So that's my beginning of my police career, where I became to take on the we'll call it the cloak and the comfort of the badge and the shield and the uniform. So yeah, and at that point in my career, I began to. So this is a turning point, right? But in the beginning of my career, I really loved being a cop. Once I got comfortable in my skin, I tell the story. My first day, I'm in uniform, but I was in Queens. I was crying. I wanted to quit. I had tears coming down my eyes because I wrote someone a ticket, and I didn't want to write it, but I felt this is what we do. And I remember walking over the Long Island in Queens. There's a bridge, a small bridge that takes you over the top of the Long Island Railroad, which goes by in Corona, Queens. And I remember walking over the railroad top and looking down at the railroad and knowing it was the Long Island Railroad. And I'm a Long Island kid, right? Born in Brooklyn but raised on Long Island. And I'm saying to myself, this is what I don't want to do this. I'm scared. I want to go home. And my mother was right. I should have stayed in school. That's what's going through my mind at 21 years old. And so it was very emasculating. It was very, so it took a while to grow into being a police officer, and it was fearful. So yeah, so there was a lot of fear, and then by the time I hit East New York, the fear waned. I do tell this story though, driving down Sutter Avenue at 6:30 in the morning. It was either Saturday or Sunday morning, and In the Ghetto comes on by Elvis. And if I didn't have, I was almost the same feeling I had, which I tell the story about what it was like to get in the shower when I get home from prison. The tears were so filling me up that I'm driving my life. I'm giving my 20 at this time 22-year-old life up to a situation that I don't know that I can handle. And that now I'm a year and a change, a year and a half in the police department almost at this time. And it's June 13th, 1983. I'm driving down Sutter Avenue, and they're throwing dice up against the wall at would be what I would become to be known as Eugene's Bodega. And I want to go home. I don't want to do this. I and I and one of the things I always remembered, my father took us as a kid and threw us in the water, knowing it was over our head, and that's how we learned to swim. So, so here I am, throwing myself in the water and saying, "It's time to swim, kid." And so yeah, so those are the lessons.
Be interesting for a lot of people to also think when they think of the bravado that you have now, the bravado that is talked about you by other people who worked with you in different capacity, right?
Right.
And for you to kind of say, well, no, I was scared shitless and this is what was going on and I wanted to end it. And I didn't want to hurt anyone. I didn't want to give a ticket. That's pretty powerful stuff. And I think, again, because if people just take the sound bites, they make a story. And
Right.
that's not really the story. And I think it's important to also look at all the steps and all the things that this was the 80s. I mean, again, really just quickly, right? New Jack City. We're talking about a time where East New York, I think it was in one of the films, said, it looked like Beirut. I mean, there's buildings, rubble everywhere. There's children with weapons. The crack and the cocaine epidemics were starting to. I mean, it was a violent time. No cell phones for those of you who aren't aware of this time of history, meaning so you're on your own with maybe a radio and one thing. It's a very different world that you were navigating, and you had to have confidence and bravado from the get-go, or you were dead. Like you said, it was that. And so I wanted to kind of shift into that first flashpoint, because again, I'm taking excerpts from other things you've said, and I want to kind of go deeper into them. About, I think someone said, like, well, what made you take your first, take essentially I don't even know how to call it, but let's just say
Payoff bribe, whatever.
take your first bribe or take some money from somewhere that was part of a, a sting operation or an
Right,
arrest and put
right,
it for yourself,
right.
right? So, and you said greed. And I was like, I don't think it was really greed. I think it was like, let's look at the fact that you said you're one of seven. If you're a firefighter, we were talking about growing up, not very well off, not filet mignon for dinner, right? So the
Although I
policeman's
although I started to buy filet mignon.
well, that's right. But what I mean is,
Yeah.
it's why it was such a delta. You're being asked to lay yourself on the line for like at what it was like what $600 a week at the time, which might
What?
equate
Whoa,
to
whoa, 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 whoa. That was
oh,
every 2 weeks.
oh, every 2 weeks, $600.
And that
Sorry.
was after I was on the job 6 years. So
All
yeah.
right. Thank you. See, good. Keep
Okay.
me on.
Okay.
I that's why I said
Yeah.
before. I was like, if I misrepresent, that this is just it's
Yeah.
a lot.
My
But
when you went in the police academy, it was $207 clear a week in the academy. And of course you had to pay travel expenses and everything, and which everyone does. And then when I hit my stride, which most of the movie is about, I was making 29,000 a year. So you can break that down to what, 500 a week, 600 a week, making, not taking home. So yeah,
yeah. So all of a sudden, you're the good guy, right? You go through all this, you risk your life, you're pushing past your own personal boundaries of fear or everything else,
right,
and you're seeing mountains of cash
right,
from criminals in front of you.
right. Right, and we call them criminals because they were breaking the law. But to be honest with you, and I mentioned it to you briefly, I didn't really. At some point, they didn't look like criminals to me anymore. I knew they were bad because they were doing bad things, but the reality was that's just how they lived. Like I don't, and I'm not justifying their actions because what they did was wrong, you know. But I began to. So there comes a point where when you're surrounded by so much of this activity, but that you actually can almost justify in their behalf why they're involved in this business because there's really no employment for them. Now, to say the word no, someone's going to say there's always the naysayer. Oh, they could have went to Burger King. They could have went. There's all those the entry level jobs, which we understand, but at that point it was like $4 an hour or $3 an hour. They're not going to be able to help pay their mother's rent or more. It's not going to
They're
work.
not going to eat. They're not
They,
going to
they
eat. They're not going
food,
to
they need
survive.
shoes. $200 for to Air Jordans with $200 back then. All right, so I mean, so my point is that you're not dealing with what people would think is there's nothing normal around you. The only thing normal is that when you leave there, you go home to what is deemed to be normal. All right. The problem is between your house and getting home, you see nothing normal. So that begins to take an effect on you. In my case, I was going home with $6 in my pocket, and I had to, I'm not going to say I had to feed my family with that $6. At the time, I was living in my parents' house, because I couldn't afford a place yet. So then it becomes a point where we started to get a little bit of raises. I got a good deal on a house. I put a tenant upstairs to pay my rent because I couldn't afford it. And then you know, I'm working hand to mouth, trying to survive. And then what came along was a young Puerto Rican kid from Puerto Rico, had no ID, but he had a good Corvette and a stack of money in his pocket. And it just, it, you got to realize that I'm doing my job and I'm just not getting ahead. So whatever. And so at some point here, I decide I mean, here's a kid who barely speaks English. He just came to America from Puerto Rico. He doesn't even have a license. He has no registration, no insurance, but he has the title. So I go, okay, the kid's got the title. It's signed into his name. I don't want to hurt this kid. He's not doing anything illegal right now, but he got a knot of hundreds like this in his fanny pack. You know what? 100 or 2 wouldn't hurt him, and we can let this whole thing go away, and I can come up. And that's really what happened at that moment. That's exactly what happened at that moment. And then, of course, when I left that scene, I was a little scared for a while, thinking, "Oh my God, what did I just do?" And But like anything else, you take a piece of candy, and then the next time you go back, you take a bag of candy, and the next time you go back, then you take a box of candy. So that was the beginning. I crossed the temptation line there, and then things began to get easier for me. So yeah, that's where I was at that very time of my career. That I focused the point. I mean, I had seen things earlier and had been maybe, let's say, lapsing or lacking, but not involved. Like I looked at something, I said, I don't care. What's it my business? That was in Queens, and then a couple of things. One of the things that really disturbed me in Brooklyn that sort of set me off. Not very, and I don't really talk about this often. You'd have to actually listen to everything I've ever said. Was I pulled a car over on Highland, on Jamaica Avenue, right near Highland Park, and right in front of the Showboat. Back then it was called the Showboat. It was a catering hall in East New York, Brooklyn, right on the border of Queens. I think it's on 75th Street. Go figure, right on the corner of 75th and the last street in Brooklyn, which I think was I could say, I don't want to say wrong. I can't remember. It might be Elders. Anyway, so I pull a car over for blowing a stop sign right in front of me. Pull him over, license, registration, and behind me pulls up a 7.5 squad car. Oh, well, they're checking me. They're backing me up. No, they pulled their guns on us. I'm in a patrol car in a blue and white in uniform, working for the 75th precinct, New York City, and I got one cop on one side and one cop on the other saying, "What are you guys doing?" With their guns drawn, not pointed at us, but out of their holster.
So that's another thing. So we talk, like I mentioned, about this dual life, right? And so there's like the military has a similar cultural situation in the organized crime world. Again, I'm generalizing here.
Right,
Forgive me.
right,
um, where there's sort of a code of conduct and a culture and basically the way you survive. And you were saying that too about the young immigrants or in the minority communities where they were doing what they needed to do to survive. What
correct,
labels we want to put on it, what's in the law, out of the law.
right,
Um, you hear once in a while about someone who's more, let's say, sadistic in nature, who really got pleasure out of hurting people rather than more just trying to make a business and a life for themselves and then
right.
protect that. And sometimes that needs intimidation or what have you. And again, neither of us are condoning any of these things. We're
No,
just trying to put a little more detail to humanize and empathize all of the people's lives besides yours, right? Who were in this world swirling
right.
together. So you have this, which I can't even imagine. And then I want to go to, so now you drive home to your new wife and baby. Tell me what that was like. I didn't hear a lot of talk about not just like the excitement of going to Atlantic City and kind of enjoying the perks of some of the early days,
Right.
but what was it like if I can ask this, in the marriage? Like, how did you then relate in the fact that you had law enforcement in your family? I don't know if they were a little bit more on the straight and narrow or if they, what is it called, on the take, right? Or if they
Right.
were open to that, and how showed up in this other, basically code switched other world. How did you shift back into that? What was that like?
Yeah, so the home life was a horror show. Not because there wasn't compassion and love. It was more that uh, um, I kept very, when I was getting deeper and deeper into the stuff, I kept very poor hours. And of course, it led to drinking and initially no drug use, but eventually drug use. And so I was less of a companion anymore. And the my at the time my wife, no longer, God bless her, she's got her own life and she's doing okay, amen. um but at the time she would threaten to divorce me every couple of weeks, and that would go on and on. And you know I it was difficult because I would look at the situation. See, men are different than women. I think, he's and she's, we look at things on. So I'm big on these reels today, right? A man buys a house, a woman makes it a home. A man brings home the food, the woman prepares a meal. Now, I'm not trying to be a role reversal guy. It's just That's what a good relationship is. And I'm bringing home the money, but she's not happy because I'm not bringing home me. I'm just bringing home money. And I'm thinking, because I grew up without money. So I'm trying to provide money. And with money, you can have everything. I'm thinking because I had love in my family, right? We all loved each other, brothers and sister. My mother and father had a very good relationship, considering all what they had to manage, and so I inherently had love in me, but I guess I didn't know how to express it. And I thought, by boy, if you bring more money, you're sacrificing more of yourself, so you're bringing more love, and that's how I sort of would get so upset. Or like, what do you mean? Of course I love you. I just spent $15,000 on a brand new mink or something. Let's love. Like it wasn't easy getting this 15 grand. It took me weeks. Whatever. I'm making a little funny here, but the point is that's how I learned, or I developed that love showing skill. Now, don't get me wrong; I was very hands on. Okay, I'm a very touchy feely person, and I think that I think I give off a loving, um, heartfelt intimacy. But I thought if there's something went wrong, as long as I put money on it, it's going to be okay. And that's how I Okay, this is one of the analogies I use today, okay? Because I'm 60. All right, let's be honest. I'm not who I used to be, but I'm certainly not what I'm gonna be, right? But at 63, I try to tell people this, and I guess it's financial based. If I hand you $1 today, that dollar took 63 years of my knowledge and wisdom and experience for me to earn. So don't disrespect that. Now, I'm not telling you I'm going to buy you with $1 or $10,000. What I'm saying is that took 63 years on this earth of a lot of mistakes, a lot of ups and downs, and a lot of lessons learned for me to bring that home. So please don't dismiss it by saying, you can't just buy me things. I understand that. But you have to, when you receive that, receive what I'm giving you as hard earned. That,
Yes, but can I say something
no, go
there?
ahead. I want
This
to.
is something that, is just a question. I don't know the answer per se, and I don't know your life, and I don't know, your former wife, but I would imagine that during that time, especially you were pretty young, okay?
Oh, yeah.
You're living this dual life. It's dangerous and it has the dopamine hit and the adrenaline run of
Right,
doing the stuff, going out, getting away with it, coming back. And
right.
she's kind of like, I don't, but I want you home for dinner or
Yeah,
whatever. I'm making this up, right?
yeah.
Okay. I get it, right? Or you said about the ming. So it's almost like it's not just a rejection of the money or the service behind it. It's also like you didn't even have that release of like it was worth it.
Right. So I'm right. So when I talk about today, I'm talking about today, not about what happened, what transpired back then. Back then, I was a different animal. I didn't have that approach. So I'm wise enough today to say to you, listen, sweetheart, whoever dealing with, mom, brother, I just gave you $50. It took me 63 years of learning to produce that. So don't just give it the respect it's due. That's all. Because money is nothing. Money is nothing. It's what took to get that. That's to me. It's like I go to your house and you put out a meal. The effort you made to put that meal together, it only cost you $16, and three of us are eating. But the effort involved in putting that meal together and keeping that house nice so I can sit at your table and enjoy a meal with you is way more than putting paper in my hand. That's really what I'm trying to show when I use that analogy today. Because years ago, I just took the money off of one drug dealer and gave it to you. So the effort wasn't there. Of course, I was costing myself mentally, psychologically, and
Yeah,
physically.
that's what I meant. Yeah, that
Oh,
effort. The different kind of
that's
effort.
that's a different animal. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and so let's just go one level into that if we could too around, being a father, being, a husband at a time and that and the culture being so different. Like now we're having these conversations. We talk about, men say I love you now or they pat themselves on each other, touch a little bit more. Actually talk about the words depressed and suicide. The fact that you get those phone calls rather than keeping it all inward, which it's still a thing. It's starting to kind of open up for the younger generations. But at that time, you, especially in a position of power and law enforcement, showing vulnerability or weakness was like, the opposite of what you were ever supposed to do, and made you, weak and a failure.
Right.
So I'm wondering, like, you did mention a little bit of drug and alcohol counseling from the force, but like, did you have anyone that you confided in terms of not the criminal part of anything? I mean, confided in about you're feeling conflicted. I saw emotion in your face in an interview about when there was a fellow officer who was killed, and when he was shot, and you happened to be there, and you picked him up in your police car, and he was bleeding in the back seat, and just the feeling at the funeral of being sort of in the blue line and also being not there. So, and then what that means, and then all of that, like, where did you put those feelings? Where did that go?
So you go to the bathroom and you take the newspaper and you sit on the toilet and cry. And that's what I did. Probably at that time, it was half a dozen times a year, every year for about 3 or 4 years. That's what I would do. Or I'd be driving to work crying. That's
So
how I.
there was some release of the trauma, but no discussion, no redirection, no under like analyzing what it might mean or what you might do. All right. So
Yeah,
that's what I thought, but
yeah,
I'm just trying to
yeah,
get it to be
yeah.
said.
The hard part was you can't share. So I'm a police officer. I'm bad. I'm corrupt. I my wife was aware of much of my activity, and all she would do is beg me to stop. She never really actually was witnessing anything, but she knew. I mean, you don't bring home 10 grand a week at
Or the
times.
car, or the
Yeah,
car.
car or the mink or this,
Mhm.
whatever it happened to be. You don't bring that stuff in around unless something's going down wrong. Now, did she see drugs at times? I would suggest that she'd seen some. Did she know about what I was up to? She knew some of it, but she never, because I basically trained her. Don't ask. If you don't ask, you don't know, and then you don't have to know. So it was one. It was a very lonely feeling that I lived because I couldn't tell. If I were to go to let's just say my mother, my brother, my wife, my father, it's like I'm really conflicted. I'm selling drugs or I'm robbing drug dealers, and they're paying me off, and I don't know what to do about it. First thing they would have said to me was, "Well, then stop." Number one, and number two, turn your life around or go in and quit the police department because you're not doing what you're supposed to do. That would have been the proper answer and probably the proper thing to do. But once again, fear based, I can't give up this job. I'll never get another job. Or I can't give up the extra money, which would have been the easiest thing to do, right? To stop, which I did at times. Just stop. But that 51-49, today the devil's 51, the angel's 49. And then, once in a while, the 51 would come out as an angel. And, that's where I should have stayed. But it just, listen, you rationalize and justify anything, right? Oh, this money's going to get vouchered and go to the city. What are they going to do with it? Spend it? I guess my family could use it better than them. So you start to justify and rationalize, and you think that that's not really criminal because they don't own it because it's proceeds of a crime, so they're not entitled to it. I could vouch for this money or drugs, but you know what? I could use an extra 10 grand or 5 grand or 45 grand. This is the type of magnitude. And this is almost daily you come across these types of things.
Yeah, and then so that sets in, and now you have two sons, right? And they're getting older. And you were
Today,
young. Well, now, yeah, but I mean, even back in the day, and also you were talking about your early 20s and being a late bloomer and kind of coming into your own. Literally, this was part of your identity at least from a behavioral science perspective, right? Like, these are these shaping moments of who you think you are,
right,
why, what, right? And so to stop is also loaded because it's not just about stop doing that.
right.
It's about stop being me in a way, right?
Stop
Because you had
being-
built up a reputation,
Let me
you
tell
had
you
a
something.
crew,
I
you had
never, I
partnerships, you
gotta
had a
stop
network.
you. Stop right there. You hit it right on the head. You hit it right on the head. That's the first time, and I've been hundreds of interviews that I give you credit for. You actually are telling me that I became what I built rather than who I was. I became that person, and I didn't know how to let go of that. That's very, very keen because while they're telling me we're watching you, I'm saying to myself, but you can't catch me. Rather than saying, okay, that's a sign, sir. That's a sign. The detectives are telling you that they're watching you. The My father's getting phone calls from his cousin that's a Suffolk County detective saying, "What's your son up to?" And I'm telling my father, "Nothing, Dad." Well, we got some phone calls from family members in the Suffolk PD, who I didn't know I had, by the way. These are the things that actually happened. I got sat down by Trimboli, if you're familiar with my case. Trimboli is the sergeant that wrote the book Good Cop, Bad Cop, which now I own the podcast, Good Cop, Bad Cop podcast. He wrote the book. He passed not long ago, about 3, 4 years ago now. He wrote the book, and he sat me down one time. I didn't know who he was, and he had me in internal affairs for some other issue that they were investigating, which I covered up for the guys. And then he said to me, "Stop doing what you're doing." And I looked at the, what am I going to say? "Okay, sir." That means I'm admitting that I'm doing something wrong.
Right.
So he went one step further and he said, "I used to do the same thing." Now that pissed me off.
Well, that's interesting. That pissed you off. Instead,
Yeah,
he was trying to, I think, right? He was trying to get you to see that he's not judging you. He's trying to help you. But in that moment, you took it a different way. Yeah. Is that what you mean? I just want to clarify.
you can do it your way. You can do it when you want. But now it's changed. The game has changed. So you got, you good? Where you going? Oh, you doing a shoot? Am I too loud? No, you're good. Okay. Can you grab me a charger, bro, for the iPhone? I don't want to go dead on you. We're getting into this. Yeah.
I'm super flattered that this is different
Yeah.
because I scratched the surface. I'm
Yeah. You
trying to.
you got me on this one. I really am.
That's what I do because you know what? I'm not trying to be famous and I'm not trying to sensationalize crime or uh, success. That's important to talk about in a lot of different places. But the point that I'm trying to make is you don't know what someone else's life is until you walk in their
Right.
shoes.
Right.
And you don't know how hard it is to get out of something once you get in deep. And it is part of essentially your DNA, the story you tell yourself. And honestly, all the basic dopamine hits of wanting to stay alive and not be here,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
then you're dealing with muting that a little bit with alcohol and other stuff, right? As best as you can
Mhm.
while you still have to show up to the job and be
Yep.
able to put on the uniform and like kind of fake it till you make it in those limited windows.
Take it
You
to
have,
take it. Yep. You're right.
right? You have a wife that kind of knows but doesn't know, doesn't want to know, doesn't, want you to do it, but you're just like she's just worried and you're putting her kind of in a almost like in a glass box,
Yeah.
right? Because she's not really in a real relationship with you anymore.
No. No. I'm in a relationship with the life that I've created,
Yeah.
and she can either join it and be supportive, or be a mother to some children and try to live like this, like in a parallel life, sort of. But you know, yeah, yeah. She really wasn't part of my life at that point, really, because I couldn't bring her that close to the danger, even though I felt no danger, but I mean, I got death threats and things, but I felt nothing.
Yeah.
So,
And literally you just kept getting reinforcement like from a chemical signal in your brain, right? You
right.
got a dopamine
Oh yeah.
hit
Oh,
every time.
every day.
Every time it worked out, every day it worked out. So,
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
we shift to the kids and
Oh,
what that was like, especially for your son who carries your name? And there was
oh,
a lot I read about that. And just like tell me some of the struggle, but also let's talk about how the good stuff,
yeah.
like let's talk about how it's going well.
Yeah. So let's start with the good stuff. My son is out in California. He does well. He's in the insurance industry. He's got 2 children. He's got probably some personality disorders from not having a father around and that insecurity feelings, but in that respect. But he's very measured. You would if you heard him speak, he sounds like me, but he speaks nothing like me. He's educated. He's intelligent. He's he's in fact, he's almost on the level of an attorney. He does a lot of subpoenaing and court appearances for the insurance companies. So he's um, he's very successful in that manner. It's almost like when I get with him, he likes to he likes to he likes to. It's almost like he wants to see, like, turn the switch on me and see how I go, because it's the life. He actually finds it exciting, but he don't want the risk, so he rather just watch Dad fuck up. But like, it's funny how, like I can see it now. Of course, I didn't see that in my 20s, but in my 60s, I'm going, this son of a bitch. He likes to turn me up and see what happens because he doesn't want to put his foot in the ring. But he likes the excitement.
Yeah, but it's also pretty, like you said, before we were recording, about, success and where it comes from, and the fact that he was able to kind of find a path
Yeah,
that is a little more, let's say, structured and stable and safe,
yeah,
and he can have success and he can do well and be a family man and do those things and reconnect with you probably in ways that he couldn't in his childhood. That's pretty awesome, considering,
yeah. We
honestly.
yeah yeah we came out of it overall pretty well. Bearing my name and wherever he went. I mean, I'll give you an example of something but that's a good one. So he's an insurance guy. He goes to a person's house. He happens to be assigned to New York at the time for whatever. I think there was a bad storm, so he responds to the storm response teams, and he shows up at a fella's house in Staten Island. And I don't know the guy. Okay, I don't know who he is. I don't even know his name. But when he looked at the name. He goes, my son gives him his business card. Mike Dowd, the cop, and he says, "That's my father." So he goes, "Your father. I never saw anybody in my life hit a golf ball like your father." I said, "Well, then he must know me." Because I was a natural at golf. I'm not a great golfer, but a good I can hit the ball, like as good as
You
anybody.
have fire. Like, listen, you have fire. I don't
Yeah,
even I honestly, I shouldn't say this because I don't mean to disrespect accountants.
yeah,
I cannot even believe that that's what you were gonna be
yeah.
doing.
Well, there you go.
I
So
feel like the creativity in you, the
yeah,
energy that you project, that was always there. It just got put in the wrong,
yeah.
direction.
Thank you,
It's just
thank you. But yes, my accounting teacher. So when I went to become a cop, I went to my accounting teacher. I said, "Look, it's the police department or accounting." He looks at me. He goes, "Do you want to sit behind the desk for the next 35 years?" I went, "Thank you." And I turned around and left. I should call him up now and say, "Thanks for the 14-year prison sentence." But
I mean, the thing is, in parts of accounting is similar to either being an officer or being
invest,
in crime, right? So you
invest.
need to have an understanding of cash flow, of in and out. And so actually it makes sense to me that you leverage those skills, but I couldn't see you
Yeah,
living that life. And
yeah,
that was also such a different time. I mean, I feel like today, hopefully, young people would get more direction and support to do something that fulfills them and that they're good at and that they can
right.
feed themselves with. But
You,
that
you,
wasn't how
yeah.
it was back then.
No, no, no. Listen, in the '80s, mom and dad could feed you; they were happy. And the mentorship. If you were a middle class or lower middle class income earners, your kids were, good luck, really. And no, and that's not to take away from the parenting. Just they were struggling to make ends meet. Times were difficult in the '80s. And then as especially '88, '89, '90, as it gets further on, the stock market tanked. People were losing jobs everywhere. So anyway, that's another dynamic. But my son Michael turned out to be a really great. Uh, Thank you, brother. He turned out to be a really great student and father and so on. So I'm going to plug in here. Hold on. Can you stop a minute? You're going to plug in. I got to hold up. Go upstairs. Bring this thing upstairs. Okay. You going to Shopperino? Oh, you going to tape? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Say hello, Frankie. Say hello to Natanya. Hello. Nice to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet you as well.
Yeah. Maybe we'll put him on a show. Frankie Steele.
I mean, I'm down for anything because I told you I'm new. I'm doing this. I honestly I get excited. I get nervous too, but I get excited.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm in his bat cave. I'm in his bat cave. Look. You see. Uh,
Ah, apropos for our other conversation.
yeah. Exactly. So. All right. Are we
Um,
good?
yeah. So, okay. So why don't we just? I think we're going to be out of time. So, do we want to go to kind of like, if you could now, like we're in the redemption part, so we're
Okay.
back to like where we are today. Can we do
Right.
that?
Yes. That's great. Yes.
Okay. So I would say, earlier off camera when we were speaking, you talked about like I'm good with me now.
Yeah.
I'm okay with myself. And
Right.
and I think that's a big thing that, is a theme and that I talk about with people that I personally also everyone struggles, whatever. I don't care if it's something that's in the tabloids or something that nobody knows but
Right.
right? Everyone can struggle with accepting that they made a bad choice or hurt somebody or did something wrong or whatever that is, and then to really get to that place of being at peace with it and for within yourself is like the hardest first step, and especially for men in powerful positions. So
Right.
that's an incredible testament. And even the energy now, we're laughing, you're making jokes, and you know
Yeah. So part of
it's
my
amazing.
so part of the process that of the redemption is you have to stop apologizing, right? Because you can't get anywhere in life if you continue have to continually apologize. So you make your apologies, you make it clear, and then you just through actions you begin to show a different person. Now, we're all going to have trip ups along the way. We're all human. We're all going to make mistakes. I've had a few, and thankfully we don't have to get into them. But I've had a few flip drop, screw ups along the way. But it's ringing, to be honest with you. But in fact, I thought I put it on silent. But anyway, um, so the redemption process becomes by you making a complete and honest. What would you say? When you do, I don't say regurgitate, but what's the word when you totally give up? You give up the ghost. You gave it up. I testified before a commission on police corruption. Okay, I didn't tell on anybody. I told them how I did it and that I could
Yeah.
and that I could help.
I watched that. It was
Yeah,
like there was one moment when they said at this point, and they were talking about at the height of your involvement with this particular crime family, I'll just say.
yeah.
They said, "Did you feel like you worked for the NYPD or for this crime family?" And you paused. You know what I'm talking about, right? I
Yeah,
studied everything.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And you paused. I did, because I'm trying to know you.
Right.
And you paused and you turned to the lawyer,
Yeah.
and it was clear that you wanted to answer the truth,
Right.
which again goes back to I'm trying to do good.
Right.
Can a liar tell the truth? Yes, you can,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you were and you but it was a lot of stakes, a lot of pressure, a lot of things going on, and then you turned back to the microphone and you said both.
Both. Yeah. So that's the beginning. That's the beginning of redemption. When you take responsibility for your actions, you now are apologizing. You're admitting your wrongs and you're turning away. You're going in the right direction. So for me, when I came home from prison, it was very difficult. I wanted to go back to prison. Okay, I didn't want to. I wanted to go back because I didn't know how to matriculate through society, and I felt like there was because there was a lot of publicity when I came home, and I felt like there was a target on my back again. And I knew that I'm not perfect, and I didn't want a mistake to send me back. What could that have been? Anything. You're late for an appointment.
Yeah.
Someone offered you some drugs. I don't know. I didn't know what it
Yeah,
was.
everyone focuses on the prison part and not the part afterwards, which most people who have discussed this say that's actually almost worse because it's unshackled and yet still rigid.
In a box. Yeah, yeah. So I didn't know how to live, and I was very fearful of it. And then I got myself in a decent routine. I had a couple of trip ups in on probation, but nothing major. A couple of minor trip ups, and I had very good support though. My parents were very good supportive. My family overall was very supportive. A lot of people don't have that when they come home, so their life is difficult. But if you do have a family support and you have a reasonable probation officer, you should be able to make it through. For me, and the reason we're even talking today is because they end up approaching me to do a video, a movie, a documentary called The 7-5, which is well done, very well done, really an excellent documentary, and it's given me a little bit of a way to launch further into doing better for anybody, really, because really you can apply the principles that I've learned through the testimony and through the 7-5 and just the ups and downs of life. That can apply to anybody in any business, right? Doctors, lawyers, accountants, professionals, athletes, law enforcement, criminal justice people, lawyers, doctors. They can all use the lessons learned from someone in a position of power and trust, and how it starts and how it ends. So, and I don't make apologies anymore. In fact, before you called me just now, I got a message, and I showed my buddy Frankie from the police chief out in Seaside, California, and he sent me a message. Mike, if you ever need me on one of your podcasts or any kind of support, let me know, because after I spoke to them, which unsolicited, by the way, after I went out and spoke with them, they're still having positive ramifications from my speaking at their organization, and that was about a year ago, around a year ago now, and I'm very proud of that, because, and I told you I had a guy today send me a message. He wanted to kill himself, and he sees me as an example of being able to get through. Answered.
That's a lot. I do want to say one thing that's sort of a disclaimer for anyone listening, because we know that there are people listening sometimes who need immediate support, right? So we want
Yeah.
to urge them to call the anonymous suicide crisis
Yes.
line 988 or suicide prevention line 1-800-273-TALK. I thank you so much for opening up a vein today. No, talking so openly
Yeah.
with me. I feel really flattered that I actually asked you different things,
That was
because
perfect.
you
Yes.
are quite all over the place and will continue to be. Who knows? Maybe you'll have me on your
That would be
show.
fun. That would
Oh,
be
yeah.
fun.
You'll be like, what do you think of this guy? I'll be like, can I really say?
Yeah.
I've thought like that. And then I'm like, really, can I say?
Yeah.
Because some of the stereotypical ticks or tells, come out just like poker when you get to
Yeah.
read people. But it's not to shame or blame. It's
Right.
really to just be like, this is my shit. So how do we make it better? How do we make it worth being here? And if there's family and children, like you said, and all these people involved, how do we show up for them?
Right.
And first, we have to work on how we show up for ourselves. So I'm so glad that you were able to take this roller coaster, you know, ride is an understatement. Let's just say multi coaster, upside down through the loops and all of that, and to come out the other side here and be so loving, so generous of time and spirit, and really, you could have been put into a little box, especially within the law enforcement world,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Like just cast aside because of that. And the fact that you're able to even have a thread there is really a powerful message for everyone.
It's a gift. It's a gift from me. It actually is a gift from me. It warms my heart that at least there's somebody in the law enforcement community that sees the value in my lesson, not what I did, but in the lesson of my life. So thank you. Thank you, Natalia. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you too.
All
And
right.
good
We'll
luck
do
with
some.
everything.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you.
At the Natanya Experience, we believe we can all rise above challenges, heal, and shine together. And so we give big thanks to our amazing partners who share our vision of universal health and happiness.